Welcome in, ladies and gentlemen, to the Air Raid Hour. My name is Steve Mathis. You can find me on Twitter at Judge Mathis, joined as always by my co-host, Dave Tilton. You can find him on Twitter at Tilt Money. Together, we are at the Bills Guys on Twitter, and we are the Bills Guys. And this is the Air Raid Hour presented by the Cover One Sports Network. We've already got someone in the chat here, AK Cash, coming in saying, hey, I saw the Cover One Mafia walking around with Cover One shirts today. So the last 2 days, Cover One has been lighting up Rochester. Eric, Aaron, Greg, Hansel, Greg Vorse, Mike Bunt, Chris Kepner. They have been blowing it up in Rochester, giving us some great training camp coverage. And we're here tonight to sort of break some of that down and digest some of that from ours and your perspective here on the Air Raid Hour. But first, we got to do a vibe check. Training camp is underway. Players are practicing. Dave, what's the vibe right now?
The vibe is it's shorts weather right now, and it's making me happy, man. I think the vibe is like I'm so excited, and I feel so fortunate to be part of this crew covering, like being part of this coverage of training camp. And I know you and I aren't there, but just to be part of this team, be able to kind of take those nuggets and talk about those things tonight. It's really got me kind of fired up, especially because, we made the change midway through the season last year. This is kind of our first full cycle through from start to finish with Cover One, and kind of, training camp for us was always a big deal, but like seeing the amount of, effort and importance these guys are putting on bringing the people on social media the best they can bring, giving them those nuggets of information. It really is. We're blessed, right, to be part of that. So my vibe check is I'm feeling very fortunate, and I'm just happy now that tonight you and I get to kind of dive into a lot of these topics, and I'm feeling really good, man. I'm feeling really good.
Yeah, it's you mentioned shorts, which was we were talking right before the show started. That was Hansel's thing today. He was vibing with the shorts at training camp, posting pictures of Stefan Diggs' shorts game, and some other guys' shorts game, talking about how the shorts weren't short enough. And there were some shorts at Bill's training camp. It's like, it almost seems like they are having a competition there to see who can have the shortest shorts. I'm waiting for one of those guys to run out there on the football field and just his jockstrap one of these days, the way some of the Bills players' shorts are riding up over the past couple of training camp practices. But before we get started, just a reminder, I want to do a quick little super chat shout out. We had 3 awesome super chats last show. We had we had a couple from your boy Lettuce, Jessica Tennis, and Jordan Forsyth. Remember, anytime that you super chat on this show, you are entered to win a chance to win a 26 shirt from us, comped. So the deal is you just simply super chat. So if you ever want to get a chat in, you super chat, and you are put into a raffle to possibly win a 26 shirt. We'll be giving away our first 26 shirt in the Bills Rams pregame. So any super chats over the next month go into a sort of little pool. We take some of that money, we put it together, and we buy you guys a 26 shirt of your choice. So just want to shout out our super chatters before we get started today, and also want to shout out Picasso's Pizza. They are the official sponsor of this show. 4 great locations: Williamsville, West Seneca, Lancaster, and Blaisdell. Buffalo pizza since 1980, that hand cut cup and char pepperoni. You can order online at picassospizza.net. And if you're not a towner like us, you can even get it mailed right to your home. And I can tell you from experience, and Dave can as well, it's just as good as getting it fresh from the restaurant. Again, so that is picassospizza.net. All right, let's just jump right into it today. We could sit here and we could talk for 3 hours, but let's try to keep it to a tight 90, for the brand, for the people.
90 hours.
Keep it to 90 hours. No, let's try to keep it to a tight 90 minutes today. I think we're going to start off with some notes from the press conferences and some notes on the offense, because the theme of this show was supposed to be a defensive preview, but we're already 2 days into camp, and there are some offensive things that we need to talk about. And then once we get those offensive things off our chest, we will tie in our defensive preview to some of the things that we have been hearing about the first 2 days of training camp. So let's get started. The first thing was there were some killer press conferences yesterday.
Oh yeah.
Going through, listening. There were some good ones today too. I really liked Leslie Frazier, some of the things he had to say, but some killer press conferences. Sean McDermott with one of the quotes of the day: expectations are for people outside the building. We are here to work. That was a way that just got my juices flowing before practices even kicked off. But Von Miller, that guy, when he takes the podium, he stands out when he has a conversation with the media and he addresses the media. A number of things he said stood out, including his thoughts on rotating defensive lines, which we're going to get to later in our defensive preview. When talking about championship teams, he had one of my favorite quotes. He says, "Success leaves clues." And then when talking about pressure, when talking about expectations, he said, "Pressure is a privilege, and there is a lot of pressure in Buffalo." So a lot of good one-liners from guys like Sean McDermott and Von Miller today. But the one thing I want to start off today with is Von Miller was asked to share traits towards the end of his press conference of successful teams. What do the Broncos that won the Super Bowl that you were with, what do the Rams, what do they have in common? What are the characteristics that these teams have that you want to see carry over to the Bills, or what brought you to Buffalo? And one thing he said in particular stuck out to me. He said, championship teams win close games. Last season, the Buffalo Bills were 0-6 in one-score games, including the season ender at Arrowhead. What is your level of concern about their inability to win close games in 2021 carrying over to 2022?
My level of concern is not high. I think some of these things sometimes are a little bit fluky, because I think if you go back and you look at the 2020 season, where the Bills were phenomenal from a win-loss standpoint, they won a lot of close games in that 2020 season. So, the law of averages, I would say, I mean, obviously, if you're a good team, you should be able to close out, tight games. But I would say the fact that they were 0-6 in those one-score games last year, including obviously the last playoff loss, is a little bit more fluky than it is anything I'm really reading into on the team's inability to close out games. And Von Miller, in a way, is talking about himself as well. As we've talked about him being a closer on this show, he's the guy that is going to seal the deal for you in those said close games. So if you're a Bills fan, or if you're the Bills and you're looking at it like, hey, we were 0-6 in one-score games last year, Von Miller's a guy who can impact those games for us in a positive way in 2022 and swing the pendulum back. Now, I'm not saying you're going to win every single one-score game. It's just, like I said, it's a little bit fluky, but I'm not going to read into it too much for 2022 compared to 2021, because in a way, even though we have Josh Allen, right, and a lot of the teams the same, it does feel different to me this year. I mean, you've got the new faces in Von Miller, you've got other new faces on the team, but there is like you said, vibe check at the beginning of the show. There is a different vibe to this team this year than I think there was last year. Last year, the vibe was, all right, let's try to make a run in the playoffs. This year, the vibe is like, we are the favorites, if not one of the top 3 teams favored to win the Super Bowl in 2022, right? So the vibe's different. I'm not going to read too much into last year. Think of it as a learning experience. Obviously, the last game of the year is really going to stick with them, but I'm not reading too much into that.
Yeah.
If anything, I think Von Miller is going to be the guy, one of the guys who kind of swings the pendulum back the other way.
Yeah, I mean, that's what you bring the guy here for, right? Like on that final drive of the game, he's the guy you're looking for to get that game-winning sack to seal the game, or the strip sack to sort of change the tides, make that game-changing play in the fourth quarter, close it out for you.
Yep.
Von Miller, you're looking for him to be the closer. Jessica Tennis comes in with a great comment. She says, "I fear McDermott and Leslie Frazier are too much on the same page, no different opinions." We had that conversation at the start of the offseason. Like, is it time to hit the reset button and bring in a different defensive coordinator just to sort of challenge Sean McDermott and his beliefs a little bit? I think, and we're going to get to this when we get to the defense, when we talk about the D-line rotations, I think Von Miller could maybe be a guy who challenges the coaching staff to switch things up and to spice things up a little bit. Like, we're going to get to that when we get to the defensive preview. Von Miller had one thing to say about how he wants to be used in a rotation,
Mhm.
and Leslie Frazier had another thing to say about how Von Miller is used in a rotation. So a guy of Von Miller's stature could be someone who, steps up and chats it up with the coaching staff. And it wasn't always just the defense either. I think back to the Pittsburgh game, specifically week 1. That wasn't on the defense. They're not the reason we lost that football game. It was the offensive line
Mhm.
and ability to score points. Same with Jacksonville. It wasn't Sean McDermott and Leslie Frazier who cost us the Jacksonville Jaguars game. It was the offensive line, and it was our offense's inability to score points. So not completely on McDermott and Frazier, but I do like where your heads are with that, because that is something that we went back and forth at over the course of the beginning of this offseason. But that brings us to, I just mentioned, there were some games this year where the Buffalo Bills struggled to score. We have a new offensive coordinator in Ken Dorsey. So the next thing I want to sort of chit chat a little bit about here is maybe some changes that we're seeing to the offensive scheme through the first 2 days of training camp. I thought there was a lot of good nuggets from the guys on hand at training camp. I have in my notes here, Ken Dorsey keeping his distance while coaching the plays, trying to sort of mimic and get comfortable calling the plays in game-like scenarios. That stood out to me as something that I read. Day 1, it was heavy 11 and 12 personnel, 3 wide receiver, 1 tight end, and then 2 tight end, 2 wide receiver. So it's seemingly like maybe those could be the 2 dominant personnel groupings this season. But then
Mhm.
today on day 2, a lot of spread formation, a lot of 5 receiver stuff. My expectation is that might be more 2-minute drill, hurry up stuff, but it was still interesting to see the transition from 11 and 12 on day 1 to that spread stuff on day 2. A lot of pre-step motion was mentioned by guys like Greg and Aaron and Eric, where, they're in the I formation with guys like Motor, Gilliam, Knox, Howard, and Diggs. But next thing you know, you're spread out 5 wide. Yesterday, you saw the same thing with Cook, Gilliam, Knox, Howard, and Davis. You're bunched up in that I formation, but next thing you know, you're spread out 5 wide. It forces the opposing defense to come at you in their base formation, and then you spread them out and you create those mismatches. And if they try to play nickel, you try to run the ball down their throat. So maybe a little bit different from the Buffalo Bills because of some of these offensive weapons they have. How much should we be reading into the first 2 days and how the Bills are using all these different formations?
Well, I mean, you like that you're seeing variety only across just 2 days so far, right? I think that that's going to be a good forecast or precursor to what you're gonna see throughout the rest
Mhm.
of camp, and I also think it's maybe a little bit of experimentation, right? Like, what seems to be working well early in camp, maybe does Ken Dorsey kind of start narrowing the focus as camp goes on to kind of what he feels is working best for his personnel. So
Mhm.
I also think it's a little bit of Ken Dorsey assessing his personnel, especially the new personnel, and the 2 guys you mentioned specifically were Cook and Howard, and how those guys are going to fit in. And I think that, that point about bunching them up and spreading them out, I think guys like OJ Howard and James Cook could be the 2 biggest beneficiaries of schematics like that.
Mhm.
Early in camp, you're trying to see if that kind of meshes well or if you think that's going to work well. And then if that does, then maybe you kind of put some packages in like that for those guys or for those formations as camp wears on. But I think early on, experimentation is not a bad thing. And I'm not saying that as in none of this stuff is actually going to come to fruition. I
Mhm.
just think it's a little bit of let's try some different things and let's see what works well with the personnel we have. So a little bit of expanding the schematics, but also assessing the personnel at the
Yeah.
same time, which the 2 go hand in hand, obviously. So I like the trend so far for through 2 days.
Mhm. Randy Hardman coming in, he's saying, I think ultimately Dorsey will be a better offensive coordinator than Dable. I was hesitant, right, to make a statement like that earlier on this offseason because, I have a lot of respect for Brian Dable and what he's done, and I know Randy does too. And I didn't want to put too much pressure on a new offensive coordinator, but through 2 days of camp, and again, this is through 2 days of camp, really excited about what I'm seeing. Guys like Stephen Burns coming in saying they talked about Texas routes and fade routes for guys like James Cook. James Cook was being used all over the field as a receiver, starting out in a pony backfield with Devin Singletary, and then flexing out and being used as a slot wide receiver. Versatility and playmakers, getting the ball in the hands of these skill position players seems to be a focus through the first 2 days of training camp. hot routes, mismatches. We saw them implementing some screens as well. Josh Allen stated, look, Brandon Beane's going to have some tough calls come the 53-man cutdown day because there are a lot of playmakers on this offense. Josh, during his press conference, yards after catch is a quarterback stat. He took some onus upon himself. Most people would say it's not a quarterback stat. Josh Allen, being the guy who he is, took that onus and said, no, it's on me. It's my job to sort of fix this and, take some of the pressure off myself in this offense. And there was a great quote from Eric Turner that I want to read here about the yards after the catch and getting the hands into some of these versatile playmakers. Eric tweeted from the Cover One account, "It seems like the offense has made a concerted effort to improve the quick game, specifically 1 3-step slants and under routes. Saw a lot of those routes the first 2 practices. Get the ball out quickly and in the hands of your playmakers." Even if we don't run the ball more in 2022, even if we don't run the ball more efficiently in 2022, it seems like one of the ways, if those 2 things don't work, and hopefully they do, in taking the pressure off of Josh Allen, is not making him have to sit back in the pocket, roll out of the pocket, and make a lot of those plays that he makes down the field. Take some of the pressure off him, let him just dump the ball off to these playmakers and let them do the work.
Yeah, I mean, it kind of a little bit reminds me of the old Chan Gailey offense in a way. Some of that quick passing game we saw with Fitzpatrick and Fred Jackson and CJ Spiller back in the day. Now, I know it's going to be a little bit different than that, but those arrow routes, those Texas routes for the backside of the backfield. I mean, James Cook, that's something that's in his wheelhouse, right? Those arrow routes coming out of the backfield and getting him matched up with linebackers, getting the ball out of Josh's hands quickly. And I mean, you hear this from analysts all the time when you're watching games on Sundays. Like, they talk about the short passing game being just an extension of the running game. And, that topic maybe gets overblown a bit, but there's some truth. There's truth to that, right? And getting the ball out quickly and getting your, not putting your quarterback in harm's way. We saw, years ago, Eli Manning Giants did that to the Bills to death in one of those games back in Orchard Park. Like, they just literally would snap the ball to him and he'd get rid of it. And like, the Bills had no chance to get to him. And it reduces the chances of him getting sacked, right? So you take him out of harm's way, you get the ball in the playmaker's hands, get him quickly. Like, you have personnel now for that with guys like James Cook, Shakir, we're going to talk about, OJ Howard, maybe even Jamison Crowder, who was absent, but it seems to be a good fit for who they have, right? And Stephon Diggs is another guy who can thrive in those types of situations as well. So I found it interesting that Josh I shouldn't say I found it interesting. I'm not surprised he took responsibility of the Yak being a quarterback stat, because that's just the kind of guy he is. But I think that people are going to automatically assume, because he said that it is, but it is still a lot about scheme and route concepts as well. He was just being the franchise leader that he is and taking that on himself.
Randy Harmon with a great comment. Added benefit of the quick hitter approach is a decreased risk of injury and a decrease in the amount of turnover worthy plays, which I think is a really good point as well. I was actually reading Randy's comment when you were talking. When you talked about the quick hitters, did you say the Eli Manning game against the Giants?
Yeah.
I thought I heard that out of the corner of my ear because I was reading Randy's comment.
It was years ago, but it was like, it was super annoying.
That game haunts my dreams. I still think about it to this day. I shouldn't say that. I don't think I've ever been more angered at like a meaningless football game. Not that it was meaningless, because I think it was still early in the season, but that's when the Bills,
fairly early.
You didn't have the expectations for those teams that you have for these teams now. I was like never more infuriated or frustrated during a football game than I was that day.
That was so frustrating.
Like, I was just so like, wasn't that the Jim Schwartz year where we were just getting sacks galore? But that day, like, Eli Manning was not having it, and our defensive line could not get that game. Just makes me, I still think about that game, and it still makes me angry. Hall of Famer Eli Manning. Ken Dorsey signed the picture I have of him of Sports Illustrated cover at Miami University. Really nice guy, says Pops Mafia. That's super cool. One of my favorite parts of Bills Embedded that aired last week, that dropped, about OTAs, was just seeing on the practice field, Ken Dorsey and Josh Allen interact. Brian Dable always had that like really great relationship with the players, and he would joke around with them and he would chuckle with them, and like he would have a good time with them while still keeping it professional. And I always saw like Ken Dorsey as this very like stoic, quiet figure. But you know, seeing that Bill's embedded, hearing Ken Dorsey mic'd up, that's not who Ken Dorsey is. So that was a lot of fun seeing that from Ken Dorsey. But Chris Jenke made this comment up in the comment section earlier. He said it's really fun to watch the offensive line sort of shuffling and rearranging. Now, the one caution or the one caveat to that is no pads until July 30th. So not only should we be taking it with a grain of salt, it's also the no pads grain of salt, like not just the first 2 days of training camp, but the no pads grain of salt. So 2 grains of salt we should be taking it with. But Ike Bucker's on the pup list. I don't have any hope for Ike Bucker playing until like halfway through the season. The news that came out yesterday was Roger Saffold is on the NFI list with cracked ribs from a car accident. Brandon Beane says he expects him back before the regular season. So you saw some shuffling along the offensive line. Day one, it was Dawkins, Ford, Morse, Bates, Quessenberry, left to right. Today, it was Dawkins, Quessenberry, Morse, Bates, and Doyle, left to right. We mentioned this on our offensive preview show last week. Regardless of injuries, this is what Aaron Kromer likes to do. He wants guys to know multiple spots, to understand the responsibilities of those around them playing the position. Injuries have maybe just accelerated or accentuated this philosophy from Aaron Kromer early in training camp. What are your thoughts on the offensive line storylines through the first 2 days?
A couple things. Number one, I find it very telling that they did not move Ryan Bates to left guard at all with Saffold being out. Ryan Bates played left guard pretty well last year for the Bills, as we know, and they made the signing and signed Saffold, right, in the offseason and brought Bates back. But they did not move Ryan Bates back to left guard with the injuries. So that, to me, tells me he's entrenched as the right guard. They don't want to move him. I don't think they really want to move Ryan Bates around too much because I think that what they want to do is really get him comfortable at right guard, knowing that's where he's going to be. And I think that, you know, shuffling him around, putting him back at left guard, then putting him back I think they want him to get as many reps at right guard as humanly possible before the start of the season, because that's going to be where he mans his post during the season. So that I found quite interesting. No real surprise about Quessenberry moving around. You mentioned this on the last show about talking about how he can play all over the line. Doyle getting reps at right tackle doesn't surprise me either. Cody Ford getting reps at left guard to start day one might have been the biggest surprise. I thought maybe, you know, like I said, maybe they would have moved Bates over to left guard and put Ford at right guard. Maybe they would have given Greg Van Roten some reps. Maybe they would have given Quessenberry some reps at left guard to start. But no, it was Cody Ford. And so that reclamation project possibly is in the works. But no huge shocks to me, right? Cody Ford at left guard to start with the ones was maybe the biggest one, but very interesting that they're not moving Ryan Bates off that right guard spot.
Randy Harmon comes in. Chris Jenke comes in with a great comment saying, you know, Bates is not taking reps with like the second team or the third team at center that we've heard of. So sort of cementing him at right guard for now. Mark Robbins coming in saying on the Cover One show when he interviewed with Eric and Kendall and Anthony, Ryan Bates said right guard was his best spot. And then Randy comes in with a comment. He says, are we settled into thinking Quessenberry and Doyle are the two front running swing players and Ford is the eighth O lineman? I'm about there, but the pads have to come on and we got to see it in the preseason, especially from Tommy Doyle. We got to see it from Tommy Doyle to me in the preseason, the developmental player he was, the way he just got beaten so much last preseason. To me, it looks like it's settled, but I think things can change once the pads come on. And I think things can change once the preseason gets started.
Yeah. I mean, look, I think Tommy Doyle has to be the front runner for right tackle right now, I would think, because I think what they're probably viewing Quessenberry as just like their utility lineman across the board, potentially. Spencer Brown and his injury starting to be a concern at his size. It is something of note, right? It's not nothing, as Greg and Aaron like to say.
Yeah.
It is not nothing. I don't know that it's like red alert status yet, but it is definitely something we have to keep our eyes on because we know he had the back problems and
Mhm.
he's a tall dude. And we always, talk about like those guys that are really tall tend to have those back issues. I mean, it's very rare when you see like super tall guys like Jonathan Ogden who kind of go through their careers without really much injury. Those shelf lives on those guys are something to look at. But
Mhm.
um, yeah, I'm probably with Randy there, at least right now. And then probably Mance is that ninth guy as the backup center.
Mhm.
So it'll be very interesting to kind of see when the pads go on, how this all kind of
A
plays
lot
out a
of
bit.
a lot of pressure on David Questenberry. I said in the last show, every time someone gets hurt, he's the first name you think of. All right, who's
Yeah.
moving where, and then where is Questenberry sliding in? Um, some other sites from the offensive line before we move on. From the cover one guys, from the cover one handle, from Greg's handle, from Aaron's handle, from Pro Ant's handle, a lot of zone work that they were doing, which is a Cromer staple. We
Mhm.
saw some screen game action. We saw the Bills running some screens, and we saw some wide receiver motion blocking, which is another staple of Aaron Cromer. Pro Anth on Twitter with a nice tweet. He said, Shakir running a Cromer staple as the wide receiver short, motioning to be hipped off the tight end, then leading the running back inside on a run, similar to what Cooper Kupp and Robert Woods have done on the Rams. So it seems like Aaron Cromer, a veteran offensive, coach, offensive line coach, a guy who's had the title of offensive coordinator before, but never called plays, guy who's been there, done that. He's having a significant sway, at least it appears early, in the green Ken Dorsey's offense, in an offense of Ken Dorsey, a guy who's never called the plays before. So it seems like a lot of Aaron Cromer staples are being implemented in this Bills offense. Before we move on to the defense, some offensive skill position players of note. I'm just going to
Mhm.
read some things that I've been seeing, and I'm going to ask you to react to some of them. Zach Moss running with the second team. And it seems like Cook and Singletary are the ones swapping on the first team, depending on what they're doing. And Moss has been steady on that second team. James Cook been doing a lot of stuff as a receiver
Mhm.
and as a running back out of the slot in a pony backfield with Devin Singletary. So what running back storylines have stuck out early to you?
Well, I mean, we talked about on the offensive preview show, the number one thing that I was looking for is James Cook's utilization,
Mhm.
right? I was super curious in that. And like through 2 days, it's kind of been what I've been hoping and expecting, right? Run as a receiver, running as a running back out of the receiver out of the slot, mixing and matching with Devin Singletary. Zach Moss running with the second team isn't a huge surprise because I expected James Cook would be getting run elsewhere, as we mentioned, as a receiver. So um, the thing that's interesting to me, and kind of you touched on it a little bit, is like the pony backfield with Devin Singletary getting both of those guys on the field at the same time. Maybe those are situations where Reggie Gilliam's not on the field, and maybe that's again one of those situations where
Mhm.
you have some pre-snap motion where you're doing some interesting things. Maybe starting them both in the backfield, moving James Cook out to the slot, and doing some interesting things. So I mean, I guess it's as I would have hoped so
Mhm.
far. Not surprised that Zach Moss is with the second team, because I didn't expect James Cook necessarily to get all of his reps at running back. So um, that's where I am with it. Not hugely
Mhm.
surprised by any of it.
Connor Kennedy comes in and says, does James Cook being on the roster make Duke Johnson a training camp trade cut candidate? I mean, to be honest, Duke Johnson was the consolation prize to JD McKissick, and
Mhm.
he was the emergency in case a running back didn't slide to the Bills in the draft where they wanted, where they wanted or felt comfortable taking a running back. But I think the second the Buffalo Bills selected James Cook, Duke Johnson became like almost an instant cut candidate for me. Like I'm not putting him on any of my 53-man roster projections. It's going to take a guy like Zach Moss getting traded with 2 years left in term on Zach Moss being a third round pick. I just don't think you're going to see that. So to me, Duke Johnson, he's a guy you're probably going to cut. I don't think you're going to get anything for him in trade value.
I
The
agree.
Bills signed him multiple days into free agency, so there wasn't much of a market for him. Last season, he wasn't even signed until mid-season with Miami. And while he played well in spurts and showed that he still got something, he's still a running back pushing 30 who's got a limited skill set. Duke Johnson seems like a guy who possibly the Bills could use one of their veteran stashes on the practice squad if they wanted to, or
Mhm.
he could just probably be a guy who sits on the street once they cut him, and the Bills can call him anytime they want if they need him. But there's a guy in Raheem Blackshear who we're going to get to when we start talking about special teams, who could be making a real strong case for the last active roster spot. We're going to get to that during the special teams portion, or definitely the practice squad with some of the things that he's doing in the return game. So Raheem Blackshear is a name that I've heard a ton over the past couple of days. Wide receivers, Stephon Diggs and Gabriel Davis, just pros being pros. Stephon Diggs, teaching Kyrie Elam, showing him the ropes the first couple of days of training camp. Gabriel Davis just looking, comfortable out there in his new role as wide receiver 2, making some plays. Isaiah McKenzie getting all the slot reps. Now, Jamison Crowder didn't practice today, but on day 1, that was notable. Also, Aaron Quinn and Greg Tomsett pointed out, other than returning punts, he's doing no special teams work, which is notable for a depth receiver. Jamison Crowder was working on the outside as well as working on the inside on day 1. He sat out day 2, which is alarming because it's the guy with chronic injuries in his career. Khalil Shakir was the favorite of all the cover 1 guys through 2 days. Crisp route running, getting separation, some crazy ball skills on some balls that weren't the best thrown in the world. Pro Anth mentioned that Isaiah Hodgins looked good on day 1. And Matt Perino mentioned that Jake Kumaro was doing Jake Kumaro things with 3 catches today. And that guy is a 4-phase special teamer. He can play the boundary. He's a big slot guy. It's going to be hard to knock him off the throne of wide receiver 6. But what are some of the wide receiver storylines that stick out to you?
I mean, first and foremost, don't know exactly what the situation is with Crowder, but we had kind of predicted that the ones would be Davis, Diggs, and Crowder in the slot. But so seeing McKenzie getting all those slot reps is notable. A lot of reports of him looking really good, including from Eric Turner on the cover 1 handle. So not that it's surprising, I guess, that McKenzie has been playing well, but that he's getting all of the slot reps because we know how important that position is to the Bills. But I also think it is a little bit of them trying to see where they can put Khalil Shakir. Notable that he's getting reps at both the boundary and the slot, and kind of making them all worth it, right? So if Mike McKenzie's going to kind of settle in the slot, that makes sense to me from a positional standpoint because he's not going to be on the boundary. But it'll be really interesting to see what the deal is with Jamison Crowder, if that ends up being a bigger storyline than it is right now. But McKenzie getting those reps out of the slots, very interesting. And then obviously really great news to hear how well Khalil Shakir has been performing. Obviously he's going to have, those rookie mistakes, but he has been a standout through 2 days so far per really everyone that's been reporting on it. And notably from the C1 guys who obviously look at things through a very, I don't want to say critical lens, but a very objective lens, I'll say, and notable that they are kind of singing his praises. So I'm very happy to hear that.
Jessica Tennis coming in saying, are you surprised Cole Beasley is not signed? To be honest, no. I mean, he's over 30 years old. He's a slot receiver, very little flexibility to, play special teams, things like that. So a limited role, but I wouldn't be surprised if, halfway through training camp, a contending team is not happy with their slot options, decide to give Cole Beasley a call. If in the middle of the season, somebody's slot receiver goes down, give Cole Beasley a call. It seemed like Brandon Beane was a little exasperated and just done with Cole Beasley in his end of the year press conference last year. But at the same time, we're in the middle of the season and Jamison Crowder gets hurt or Isaiah McKenzie gets hurt. We're week 8, we're week 9, and the Buffalo Bills are without a slot receiver. The Bills could easily give Cole Beasley, Darrell Williams, AJ Klein are all still sitting on the street. So if the Buffalo Bills need any of those guys, they all have familiarity with the Buffalo Bills system. So I don't know what that says about the Bills roster last year. Those 3 guys are still unsigned, but there's a lot of veterans still on the street right now. I mean, we talked about Joe Hayden on the show. There are others. Brandon Beane talked about in his press conference. There are some players who are rehabbing injuries right now that the Bills still have their eyes on and could bring in for a workout once their agent says they're recovered. So I think that's just the way the NFL is right now. I think a lot of these veteran players they're just going to wait for the perfect opportunity or wait for the perfect opportunity to open up because of an injury. I don't think they're going to sign somewhere and be stuck on some bad team when they could wait and maybe get a better opportunity. So I'm not surprised Cole Beasley's unsigned. How about you?
Not really. I think, I talked about this on the Caveman show a
Mhm.
little bit last week. I think the Steelers could be a nice fit for him. I mean, they've got Chase Claypool, Deontay Johnson. They know they drafted Calvin Austin and George Pickens, but the fact of the matter is like outside of Calvin Austin, do they really have a pure slot guy? I think he could
Mhm.
be a nice fit for the Steelers. That's one place I think could be a team that could be good again. This could be rebound
Mhm.
this year with a different quarterback situation. Alan here has a super chat. Thank you, Alan. I thought this is a really interesting
Yeah.
comment, and as us as draft guys, we'll try to answer this.
Mhm.
I always hear about Shakir being such a steal in the recent draft, but also he was a later round pick. What makes him so good but fall so far? I think there's a lot of factors here. Number one, I think it was a very deep wide receiver draft.
Yep.
He was sliding in the fourth round, and the Bills ended up picking him in the very early fifth round. They traded up, so it was like I think within the first 3 picks of the fifth round, they picked him. He was only like a 4.5 guy as far as speed, so he didn't really. He's
Mhm.
not like a top end
Four,
speed
four,
guy.
4.43, which is actually a little
Oh,
shocking.
was that what it was? I thought he was a
Yeah,
4.5.
but I do think that sometimes in some cases, NFL GMs do look at a guy and go, yeah, I know what he clocked at the combine, but I also see the
Mhm.
tape and he isn't like a burner on tape. So
Yep. And he is getting reps on the inside and out, but I
Mhm.
think most scouts probably pegged him as more of a slot only guy.
Yeah.
I'm not saying that that's all he has to be because he obviously did both in
Mhm.
college. And then I just think and then part of that is just the level of competition as well. So
Yeah.
I think the three factors there, but probably most notably the
Mhm.
fact that it was like a very deep wide receiver class, I think is the
Yeah.
number one reason.
So what makes him so good? Insanely good route runner, insanely good contact balance. Like once he gets the ball in his hands, he's like a running back. Really good short area quickness and just wiggle and just being creative in order to get open. Kick and punt returner flex. He did run that 4.43 and shows he can, he can stretch it when he needs to. Those are all the positives with Khalil Shakir. The negatives, length, got short arms, right? So that's a concern. Can he play on the boundary with those length issues? He's had a number of injuries. Like we've already seen him like taped up and wrapped up to the max. He missed time in March in OTAs. Like Khalil Shakir kind of looks like a rec league basketball player out there, like with
Seems
all the
fragile. He
different
seems a little fragile.
like maybe we shouldn't keep him too close to Jamison Crowder. But he's got like a whole bunch of reps and all these different things on his knees and his calves and all these. So he kind of looks like a rec league basketball player out there. So that was another probably ding is like, can he stay healthy? And then yes, is he a slot only type of player and how deep the class was, level of competition, those all played a role in it, I think, as well. But yeah, there was a really good Shakir wearing a sleeve on his leg. Banged Up Bills had a great tweet where he just took a picture of him and he showed all the different things he was wearing and why he was wearing them. It was concerning, concerning the number of things that he was wearing all of that equipment for. So definitely don't keep him too close to Jamison Crowder. But moving on from the wide receivers to tight end, Dawson Knox, he had 2 drops on day 1, which is obviously concerning given his history. But other than that, he's looked the part. He had a press conference today, said, I just bought a house in Buffalo. I want to be here. I want to be extended. I let the Bills know. So I'm hoping that the Bills can maybe work out a deal with him in season because the price of tight ends just keeps going up and up and up.
Wild.
OJ Howard, I haven't like seen any tweets like single-handedly like singling him out for something he's done, but I definitely have seen a million tweets and a million reactions from people who are there, seemingly getting a ton of work in these 2 wide receiver spread and mismatch looks. Reggie Gilliam, hearing his name a lot in packages, either as a fullback, as a split out wide receiver, and getting some work as tight end. So Reggie Gilliam is again just proving to be the every man utility man of this offense. Maybe Reggie Gilliam with the influx of Aaron Cromer and some switching up of packages get some more run this year as an extra blocker and a guy who can maybe still do a little thing here or there in the passing game. And then Quentin Morris impressed Perino on day 1. And Hansel talked about Jalen Weidermeyer catching a shovel pass today. So that's about it in terms of what I've heard about the tight ends through 2 days. What storylines stick out to you?
I mean, nothing really. Look, the Knox drops.
Mhm.
I'm not reading too much into that. It's an easy um, thing to talk about through 2 days, right? And so I'm gonna stay away from that. And Chris makes a good point. All I hear about OJ Howard is how
Mhm.
big he is, and that Aaron Quinn made that comment as well, right? When sitting in the stands and talking about how he's just a massive dude. And I think that the biggest thing I want to see is, like we started talking about at the onset with the formations, is like, how are the Bills going to start using more two tight ends, and how frequently they're going to do things like that. And we know OJ Howard is definitely more of that receiving type tight end than he is the blocking type, but that doesn't stop you from, bunching him up and then spreading him out. It doesn't stop you from doing that, right? So
Mhm.
the tight end room is going to be interesting. I think Reggie Gilliam is pretty much a lock to make the team. So the big question that we've had really throughout the offseason since we signed OJ Howard, and really since after the draft, has been, how many tight ends are the Bills going to keep,
Mhm.
not including Reggie Gilliam, right? Will they keep 3 or will they keep 2? I don't think there's any chance they keep 4. So I think the question will be,
Mhm.
will they keep 2 or 3?
Yeah, it's going to be interesting. Perino wrote an article today talking about like ways Cam Lewis can wiggle onto the roster because Cam Lewis has had some good practices, and we're going to get to defense in a moment here. He talked about how the Bills carried 11 defensive linemen this year. He thinks they can knock it down to 9. I agree with that. I'm going to talk a little bit later about how I think this could be the year that Tywan Jones is expendable. So there are some open roster spots. So do you use one of those open roster spots or on Tommy Sweeney, Jalen Weidermeyer, or Quentin Morris? Or do you think to yourself, I like all 3 of these guys. I'm going to waive all 3 of these guys. I can sign 2 of them to the practice squad and have them anytime I need them. So those are some of the decisions. I think special teams is going to be a way more impactful way in which a Sweeney or a Weidermeyer or a Morris makes this roster. But again, if we get into the preseason and Jalen Weidermeyer catches like 4 tutties, you might have to keep him on the roster just to protect him, because then his
Yeah.
name is out there. Guys are going back, they're looking at his tape, they're scrolling Twitter, they're searching his name, they're looking for camp reports, and he might get, claimed onto another roster. So if a guy blows up in the preseason offensively, that changes something. But for right now, I think special teams is probably the route for most of these guys if they want to crack that 53. All right. So we are 43 minutes in. We're finally to the point where we're going to talk about the theme of today's show, the defense. So I'm feeling confident we can keep this to a tight 90 today. We're going to start with the defensive line here. And
Mm.
again, same caution with the offensive line. No pads until July 30th. So not only the first and second day of training camp, grain of salt, 2 grains of salt here, because it's also no pads for linemen, grain of salt. But I want to start with Von Miller. And in his press conference, he made an interesting comment. He says, I will do whatever the coaches tell me to do, whatever they think is in the team's best interest. But he essentially insinuated that he, in no way, shape, or form, wants to be part of a heavy defensive line rotation. Leslie Frazier this morning was asked about Von Miller's comments, and Frazier said it was discussed with Von before he signed. He's used to one way. We have this philosophy of rotating our guys. We will find a happy medium. What are your thoughts on Miller's use in a rotation and the comments from these 2 pressers?
We'll find a happy medium from Leslie Frazier
Mm-hmm.
is basically him saying, I think Leslie Frazier conceding to Von Miller in a way, because like, you're not paying this guy those huge
Mm-hmm.
bags of cash for him to be on the sideline. Now, he's going to be on the field for your most important plays. There's no doubt
Mm-hmm.
about it. Like the money downs, third downs, he's going to be there. But like, Von Miller playing 75% of the snaps is not an unreasonable thing for Von Miller to want to do. He's had at least like pretty much 75 to 80% snap share throughout his entire career. His last couple years, obviously the year before the injury in Denver, or the year, I should say, after the injury in Denver, I think was his lowest snap share percentage, but he's been over 70% every year. And so
Mm-hmm.
Mark makes a good point. 70% Miller, that's going to get him on the field, obviously, for 3 out of 4, downs in each series. And I think that's fine. Get him around 75%. So Leslie Frazier conceding a little bit, saying we'll find a happy medium. I think pretty much saying he's not going to be on the field for 100% of snaps, but he might not be in the same sort of classic 60%, 50 to 60% rotation that we've seen from other guys that have come
Yeah.
through those doors. So, and there you go. So
Mhm.
never played less than 79, consistently 85. So
I
I'd
I think
expect
that
him to be around.
I think the happy medium will be like 70-75%. And like
Yep.
in big games, it'll go up. Like in the playoffs, it'll go up.
Yep.
I do think early on in the season, but we do have a tough stretch, like the first 6 games. So maybe it's like high in the first 6 games, like 75-80%, comes down a little bit in the middle of the season and then revs back up once we start getting towards the postseason, the playoffs. But I don't know if the Bills are going to concede to Von Miller to an extent where they're going to give him like, 85-90% of the snaps. But I do think they'll concede into where he'll get, and Ryan Sullivan did a great piece. They've done this before with guys like Trent Cole and Greg Hardy and Charles Johnson. He could, I think he could push 75%, 80% of the snaps without a doubt. Some other interesting comments. Greg Tom Set was just one of the things we got to talk about with Von Miller is just he's doing things out there that Greg had never seen before. Like, and that he wasn't the only one who commented that. There were multiple beat reporters and people who know their stuff on the football field, or even just casual fans at training camp were like, this just looks different than what we're used to when we show up to training camp on the defensive line. Like, this guy is bending in ways and getting into the quarterback in ways that we have just never seen before. It's just different. It's noticeably different. So it's we paid him all this money and we expect it, but it's still good to see that he's as advertised once we get to training camp. I thought the comments today from Leslie Frazier on Jordan Phillips were really interesting. I don't know if you've had a chance to see Leslie Frazier's press conference. I'm going to put some clips up later tonight on our Instagram, our TikTok. I'll throw them up on Twitter as well. Some clips that I thought were most interesting from the press conference. But here's what he had to say on Jordan Phillips. He said that the goal with Jordan Phillips is trying to recapture that 9.5 sack season he had in 2019, trying to get him back to that place. He said he had a great spring. He had a great offseason away from the team. Eric Ciano, the team's strength and conditioning coach, says his conditioning tests were, finger quotes, off the charts. You got the generic. He was the first one in the gym this morning from Leslie Frazier. And he says that they expect someone similar to what they had 3 years ago. Being out here in the desert in Arizona, I can confirm that his habits, his mindset, his motivation, they were all questioned by the fans and the media out here after he got that big contract and laid an egg in the 34 defense here in Arizona. He also had some not so complimentary things to say about the Arizona Cardinals and Vance Joseph in his welcome back presser. So it almost seemed like he was in talks to sign with the Buffalo Bills before his deal in Arizona was even torn up. I think Arizona gave him permission to do that. Do you think Phillips can recapture that 2019 form? And if so, like, sky's the limit. He might be the one guy that we're not talking enough about.
I think he can flash some of that 2019 form, right? I think he's still got some of that in there, but I think I don't think it's fair to expect that he's going to get back to 9.5 sacks if you want to put a number on it. I think he's in the right situation for him. I think he pretty much did what he had to do throughout his career, right? He got his money when the iron was hot. He struck while the iron was hot. The grass isn't always greener from a fit perspective, from a coaching perspective, from that, but you got your money. You kind of now are at the point where you want to maybe rehabilitate your image and justify a little bit in your own mind why you got that money in the first place. So I think he's in the best situation he can be in. A rotation for him is a good thing, playing with guys like Settle and Daquan and Oliver. I mean, he's in a really nice situation there where he can kind of make the most impact, I think. There's not a huge amount of expectations on his shoulders like there would have been after he signed that contract with the Cardinals. So I think that's a nice spot for him to be in, Jordan Phillips as a player. Working hard, not a ton of expectations on his shoulders. So what he does deliver is going to be a bonus, I think, in my mind. So I think a really good situation for him. And I think that the Bills were savvy in re-signing him, I think, and kind of adding him back to that rotation, because in reality, they got the most out of him more than any other team. So I like it for him.
Yeah, it's going to be really exciting once the pads go on. Chris Jenke says Bills arguably have the best and deepest offensive and defensive line in the McBean era. Mark Robbins comes in talking about how there's going to be some mop-up sacks. I mean, that's just that four-man, like, you got Von Miller rushing from the outside. You have a really good secondary that maybe can stymie some receivers. So the quarterback has to hang on to the football. Guys like Ed Oliver are going to eat. Jordan Phillips are going to eat. Tim Settle's going to eat. So I really am expecting an uptick of sacks from this offense or this defensive line this season. Some other guys that were mentioned in the comment section over the course of the last couple of minutes here. Looking at my notes, Eli Anku, calf strain. He's out indefinitely. He strained it during conditioning the first day of training camp before they were out there practicing. Tim Settle had a day 1 pick 6 off of Case Keenum, or at least a could have been pick 6. Some people said that he started to struggle a little bit once he got past the 50-yard line. Didn't look like he wanted to keep running. Don't blame the big man. Ed Oliver, I saw a note of him just absolutely schooling David Quessenberry for a sack when David Quessenberry was in at left guard. Basham wearing 55, looking lighter, leaner, bendier. I've seen that in the comment section a couple of times. And then last but not least, Brandon Beane had some comments about AJ Epinesa in his press conference. He said he was in the best physical and mental state of his career. And I thought that was kind of telling. He talked about his weight drop from 240, what a struggle it has been for the players in that draft class because they're a year behind in reps from those OTAs. He talked about him hitting that wall after the Miami game. He made it sound like maybe there was a confidence issue going on with AJ Epinesa. So I'm hoping a veteran guy like Von Miller might be able to sort of, help AJ get his groove back. Not that he's ever had a groove in the National Football League, but maybe get some of that college swagger back. So
you saw him embedded. You saw him embedded with AJ Epinesa. Mm-hmm. He was like, Von Miller's teaching me things that I hadn't even thought about myself. And like, part of me is like, really, AJ? Like, you're like, some of these things you haven't thought of, but then part of me is like, all right, like at least he's like, he's acknowledging it, right? Like it's, I don't know, man.
This reference is going to date me a little bit. Him wearing those shades to Von Miller's pass rushing summit, he looked like Will Smith in like Wild Wild West with those shades on.
Yes,
I was like, I don't know about the shades, dude. I don't know about the shades. I wasn't feeling the shades.
They were like baby aviators.
Yeah,
baby
aviators. I was not feeling it. And then Leslie Frazier was talking some good things about Tim Settle. I love the energy that Tim Settle brings. Very Jordan Phillips-esque, right? Like, you saw the first day of training camp. Josh Allen came out to this huge applause. Stephon Diggs came out to this huge applause. Von Miller came out to this huge applause. And Tim Settle started to walk out and everyone was just kind of like going about their business. And he was like, no, I'm not having any of this. And he was pumping up and he was riling up the fans as he ran out onto the field. So that was good to see. Randy Harmon comes in and says, if this group can't help unlock Edmonds, then it's time to move on now or never. And that is a sort of perfect little transition here to the linebacking core. Tremaine Edmonds, Matt Milano, obviously they're our starters, right? Like we know there are starters. Randy talked about unlocking Edmonds here. I think he has to do that, but I don't know how much of that we're going to see in training camp. I don't know how much of, despite the fact that a reporter today asked if there was any drills that can make him more clutch, I don't think that you're going to see. I don't think you're going to see Tremaine Edmonds
move that clutch slider reaching up on Madden all the way up to the top. 99.
I don't think you're going to see any drills that are going to help us assess that from Tremaine Edmonds or even Matt Milano in camp. So things with Edmonds and even preseason, because it's very vanilla. That's going to be like a pause and wait till week 1. Let's hope they're healthy. Keeping those two guys healthy throughout the season is another thing to talk about. But setting those two guys aside, looking at the rest of the linebackers, Tyrell Dodson, talking to Eric in the Cover One group chat, third linebacker in base on day 1, and the backup Mike linebacker behind Edmonds calling the plays from his helmet. That's big. Baylon Spector was running as the backup middle linebacker today behind Tremaine Edmonds. Terrell Bernard has flashed, catching a lot of people's eyes with his pass coverage, going step for step with guys like Dawson Knox, having that nice pass breakup. So what are your thoughts on the guys scratching and clawing to be that first linebacker off the bench for the Buffalo Bills?
Yeah, I mean, it certainly seems, at least right now, that it looks like it would be Dodson based on kind of what Eric was saying and sort of how his role has started out, at least in camp. But I think you're going to see Bernard get those chances as well. Obviously, with the physical stature of Bernard, you wouldn't necessarily expect him to be coming in as the backup Mike, but maybe in some interesting situations in pass coverage, as was mentioned, right? Balon Spector, we talked about him. Both of us talked about him as being a wild card player to make the roster. And I think with the Andre Smith suspension, the fact that he ran with the backup, ran as the backup Mike on day 2 is a good start for him, right? We'll see if that continues, but it's a good start at least. And I think that all 3 of these guys have, Dodson and Bernard, obviously, I think clearly on the inside right now of the roster, but Spector kind of making his case to almost be a roster lock, at least through 2 days. And it's premature to say that, but I'll say it is premature to say that, but you like to hear this type of report as opposed to him not being anywhere to be found, right? Like that's what you're.
So instead of calling him a lock, you could say, like, in my opinion, I'm pretty confident that there is a spot on the 53-man roster for Balon Spector right now. And I look at that, right? And because I have right here my notes, I am confident that Balon Spector makes the 53. The Bills traditionally keep 6 linebackers: Edmonds, Milano, Dodson, probably with his experience, Bernard, Matakevich, that's 5. Who's the 6th guy? I'm feeling confident it's going to be the guy they drafted over the 2 guys who have been on and off NFL rosters over the course of their career, Joe Giles Harris and Markel Lee. So they're going to go with that guy they drafted in, Balon Spector, and Andre Smith is suspended. So week 6, they look, Andre Smith comes off the suspension list. They sit there and they assess Balon Spector. Have you done enough to stay on the 53-man roster? Okay. You have. Andre Smith, we're cutting you. No one's probably going to want you. We'll sign you to the practice squad.
Yep.
If Balon Spector struggles in the first 6 weeks, you have Giles Harris or Markel Lee, who you probably can keep on your practice squad anyway, at least one of the 2 that you can call up if need be, or you have Andre Smith waiting in the wings in week 6 if he struggles. But I think the tie goes to, and the Bills want the draft pick, the guy with 4 years of cheap term, to be the one who wins that 6th linebacker job. And I'm way more confident right now, a million times more confident right now than I was the day he was drafted.
Oh yeah. That goes without saying. I mean, I think there were plenty of offensive lineman guard stuff still on the board, like late in that draft. And I was like, we go with a linebacker really after we had already taken Bernard early. It was a very interesting pick, but you can kind of see maybe the Bills really finally trying to turn over the bottom of that linebacker depth chart, because we know Matakevich is going to be there. So, hey, this is their chance to do it. And look, if he can crack the roster as a special teamer and take Andre Smith's spot, I don't think anyone's really going to be losing any sleep over that. Maybe Randy will lose some sleep over that.
Yeah, Randy comes in and says, okay, Judge, in my opinion, Balon Spector will be trash once the pad goes on. I know he's a very anti-Clemson guy. But just, to clean up some of my notes here, I did some research on Pro Football Reference, looking at snap counts and stuff. If you look at the snap count in preparation for the show, because one of the takes I had in my notes before training camp kicked off was, if you look at the snap counts for Markel Lee last year on Pro Football Reference, defense to special teams, and Tyrell Dodson, they're practically the same. They pretty much mirror each other. They took just about the same amount of special team snaps, and I think Tyrell Dodson outsnapped Markel Lee on defense like 76 to 30 something. Obviously, Markel Lee was doing what he was doing for the Las Vegas Raiders, but they were essentially the same. Markel Lee was playing the same role for the Raiders that Tyrell Dodson was for the Bills, and the Buffalo Bills had signed Markel Lee once. I think they even maybe they might have signed him 2 times already, and this might be the 3rd time he's back on the team. The Bills have shown consistent interest in Markel Lee. So the whole time I'm thinking to myself, like, man, maybe this linebacker competition is a little more, could be a little bit more competitive than we think. But then I hear Eric saying the dude's running second team Mike calling the plays. He's the first linebacker off the bench. That could change 2 weeks from now. We could be having a completely different conversation, but at least through 2 days, I'm feeling pretty confident that the 6 linebackers are going to be Edmonds, Milano, Dodson, Bernard, Matakevich, and Spector right now. I think those are the 6 favorites, at least right now. And it'll be interesting to see in 2 weeks whether that changes and
Yep.
whether the depth chart starts to change. So, and then Bernard still looks very thin. I thought they would try to beef him up, but he still looks pretty thin, listed at 223. I don't think he's ever going to be like an AJ Klein base defense type of replacement. But I was listening to some of the things that Leslie Frazier had to say in his press conference. They asked him specifically about Bernard and what kind of role he was playing. And Frazier made an interesting comment. He said, linebackers and safeties sort of are kind of interchangeable in today's NFL, or have to be interchangeable. They have to share responsibilities. And that really got me to thinking, you obviously don't want to take Teron Johnson off the field. Your base is your nickel. Teron Johnson is one of, if not the best nickel corners in the National Football League. You don't want him off the field. But you have a team like the Ravens on the schedule. You have a team like the Patriots on the schedule. Instead of throwing a Tyrell Dodson out there in base who might not be able to drop back into pass coverage when they try to flex you out, you have a guy like Bernard who's a little bit beefier than, Teron Johnson, but also can blitz and has coverage chops. So I think a guy like Terrell Bernard, maybe he's that thick nickel, thick dime that we've been, or big nickel, thick dime that we've been talking about for the last, seems like 100 years. Maybe this is the role that they have caved out for Bernard. But right now it seems like he's strictly running at weak side linebacker behind Matt Milano.
Yeah, and that's okay for right now, right? I think that as he gets comfortable in that role, and then Frazier starts putting more on him. But I do like the fact that Frazier at least acknowledged the evolution of the defensive side of the ball in the NFL, right? We've talked everyone talks about how the passing game has changed, like how the offense, rules have catered to the offense, blah, 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 over the last decade plus. But defenses have had to adapt as well. And that sort of linebacker safety hybrid type player is something that NFL teams are going to have to acknowledge now. And say what you want about Belichick. He's kind of had these type of guys on his teams. Other teams have had these types of sort of role players. We remember who was the guy with the Cardinals, the safety sort of linebacker flex guy they used for a long time. He was too small to be a linebacker, but too big to be a safety. Can't remember his name.
Cardinals.
Yeah.
Bernard Pollard.
No.
Oh, I know who you're talking about. Give me a minute. Keep talking.
Yep.
I'll get
Anyway, I think starting Bernard out with a true sort of position, not putting too much on his plate starting out, is the right call. As he gets comfortable throughout camp, then maybe you start mixing him into certain specialty packages you have. And I think that he will be ready for it, right? And I think that one thing I want to see also the Bills do with Bernard is kind of see how they use him on in pass rushing situations as well, because he's been obviously scouted and productive in his career as a pass rusher from the linebacker spot. So that's something that could give you a little bit of flexibility as well. But I'm trying to remember who the
Deion Buchanan.
Deion Buchanan. Yep,
who I'm looking up his height, weight, 6'1", 211. So Bernard is what, 6'1", 223. So similar-ish size too. So it should be interesting. He was listed as a safety for the longest time, and then towards the end of his career, once he lost a step, they just started listing him strictly as sort of weak side linebacker, sort of that sort of Brian Scott type of role when he was at the end.
That's
of
the
his,
guy who I was thinking about.
His career with the Bills. Randy Harmon, CR coming in, asking you to smash that like button. There's 115 of you in here. We would super appreciate if you just take 2-3 seconds if you like what you're hearing, or even if you don't, to smash that like button for us. It helps us with the algorithm. Much appreciated. Thank you if you can do that. On to cornerbacks here, and I'm proud of us, man. We're already on corners, and it's an hour 5. I'm proud of us. Bills and Tre White. That's the biggest storyline, I think, at cornerback coming in. The Bills on Tre White towed the company line. Sean McDermott, he's on schedule. Leslie Frazier, he's on schedule. Brandon Beane, he's on schedule. The word on schedule was used by everyone. But man, seeing the pictures and the videos that people are posting, he's doing a lot of stuff on the sideline. And in my opinion, he looks like he could be ready to go week 1. Now, my doctorate is still in the mail. I'm waiting for it. I paid a ton of money for it. They haven't sent it to me. It's been years, but I do think that Tre White could possibly be available for week 1, the way that he looks on the sideline. But Brandon Beane did lay out his plan. It's going to be Elam and Dane Jackson on the boundary. That's how they start out the first 2 days of camp. He says if they struggle and Tre looks like he will miss some time in the regular season, he's not going to hesitate to look for a veteran via trade or to sign a veteran off the street. Joe Hayden, what are your thoughts on the latest of this Tre White situation here?
I mean, it's smart for the Bills to toe the company line, right?
Mhm.
Because the last thing you want to do if you're the Bills is, as we use in my corporate world, my day job, you don't want to overpromise, underdeliver, right? If anything, you
Mhm.
want to underpromise and overdeliver. So the Bills right now, I think, I don't want to say they're underpromising, but they're being very careful not to overpromise on Tre White. So
Yeah.
while it's great to see him out there, uh, that's a lot different than putting the pads on and making football cuts and doing football,
Mhm.
doing football moves and that type of thing. So I I feel good that he's out there and he's doing those drills. I think was it Beauvais who posted the clip of him jumping around? I
Yeah,
think it
jumping
was.
around, running
Yeah.
around, like on the
Yep.
bike, doing sprints, all these things. No
Yeah.
brace or
So
anything. No brace or
yeah, no
anything.
brace. So like people are gonna read into that, and that's
Mhm.
fine, right? I mean, it is July 25th. We're talking about like less than a month and a half until the start of the season. So it's going to creep up on us. And it's not like we've got months and months to go here. So is he going to be ready by week 1? I don't
Mhm.
know. Right. But I certainly feel more confident now that he might not have to wait till after the
Yeah.
week 8 bye or whatever the bye was. I think we come back and play the Packers. Right. So like maybe he'll be ready by week 2 or week 3, and it won't be a situation where he has to go on short-term IR or whatever. And maybe he actually is on the active 53 to start the season, which
Mhm.
potentially takes a roster spot away from some of the guys we talked about
Yeah.
last week, like McLeod and Benford. So we will
Yeah.
see.
Jessica Tennis coming in asking if there was any sort of official announcement on the injury. I don't think I ever saw anything official, and people in the comment section could tell me if I'm wrong. I vaguely remember hearing like, and this might not even have been official, that it was just an ACL and it wasn't anything else. So that's good because it was only one thing. But if anyone in the comment section has a more clear
I
cut
believe that's
answer,
right. I believe
uh,
that's right.
I think it was an ACL tear, whether it was partial or full, I don't know, but I believe no other ligaments were damaged, which is a good sign. If that ACL can heal quickly, you're seeing a ton of guys. Like I think Chris Godwin's like ready for the start of camp, but you're seeing some other guys who it's taking a little longer, guys like J.K. Dobbins and stuff. So it all depends on the extent of the injury, the ligaments that were damaged, etc. And teams are usually keeping this a little tighter to the vest. I don't think they have to report the specifics of the injury per se. So it'll be interesting. Like I said, I don't think anything ever officially came out, but I could be mistaken. I'm also pretty convinced that the Bills have Joe Hayden in their hip pocket if they need it. I mean, it. I think we're in the situation where the Bills don't want to take reps away from Dane Jackson and Kyrie Elam. Makes sense.
Yep.
I think
Yep.
we're at the point where, Joe Hayden doesn't want to come here and play for 4 weeks and then go to the bench once Tre White is back. I think he wants to be a starter, and I think he wants to be told he's a starter in order to sign somewhere. So I think this is a situation where the Bills can gauge their guys now, and they can pull that trigger if it works for both sides. Now you run a
Right.
risk, right? Like 2 weeks from now, some team could lose a corner to a torn ACL, a fresh torn ACL, and go and sign Joe Hayden. You lose out on that. That's the risk you run. But I think the Buffalo Bills have Joe Hayden in their back pocket if they want it. I think that's an ace in the hole for them if they feel like they need that. I also think that Odell Beckham Jr. could be an ace in the hole for the Bills this year too. Like if OBJ is
Well,
not ready, till week 8, 9, 10, and the Bills happen to lose, I don't think he'll sign here just to sign here. Like if we have Davis and Diggs, but if Davis or Diggs do happen to go down, I feel like we got OBJ with Von Miller connections. I think we got OBJ in the hip pocket at
well,
midseason if we need him.
I
Feeling
mean,
confident in that
even
too.
I mean, even if Diggs and Davis are there, and maybe
Mhm.
Crowder's, maybe something happens
Yeah.
with him, and he's got nagging injuries all year. Maybe Shakir, um, is more of a bit player this
Yep.
year. And then, like, if the Bills are going for the Super Bowl this year, and what's to stop them from having that trio of Beckham,
Yeah.
Diggs, and Davis just for like 7-8 weeks, right? I mean, just like, don't rule it out, right? But
Mhm.
I don't necessarily think it even has to do with Diggs or Davis. I think it has to do with
Mhm.
the rest of the guys. I think it has to do with
Yeah.
Crowder. I think it has to do with Shakir, McKenzie, right? I think it has to do with those guys, and how those guys are faring, and sort of what the Bills' trajectory is like 8-9 weeks into the season. I mean, if the Bills are humming along and they're 8-1, 7-2, they
Yeah,
may
you
not
don't
want
wanna
to
mess with
mess.
that.
Might want to mess with it.
Mhm.
But from Odell's standpoint too, if the Bills are sitting there at 4-4, 5-4, like, is that a team he's going to want to go to? Like, I don't know. So,
Mhm.
it's a non-zero chance, but
Yeah.
it's low. It's a low likelihood, I think.
I was just looking for some clicks, and you know
I
me,
like it. I
attention
like it.
attention whore. We got Chris Janke coming to the super chat. I always appreciate you, Chris. He says, I want to hear about Nick McLeod. I love players with corner safety flex. Let's not forget Poyer and Hyde started their careers as corners. This is where it gets interesting too, right? Because you and Chris is gonna love this. Roster gymnastics. If Tre White is ready week number 1, you have White, Elam, Johnson, Jackson, and Neal. Saran Neal's making this team because of special teams. That's 5 corners. Poyer and Hyde are making the team. Johnson and Hamlin are probably making the team as well. That's 9. That's 9 guys. The
Yep.
Bills typically keep 9 DBs. So it's going to take a lot for Cam Lewis or Nick McLeod or Tim Harris or Christian Benford or Elijah Griffin to make this team if Tre White is back week 1. But I thought Matt
Yep.
Perino made some really good points in his article today. I don't think we're going to keep 11 on the D line again. That's 2 roster spots. I don't know if these DBs show up and show out, not just as corners, but on special teams. Maybe you can keep 10 DBs and 3 running backs and get rid of Tywan Jones. So he is talking about Nick McLeod in this situation, which is interesting because I think Nick McLeod showed out last year. The Bills were impressed. They just didn't have a spot for him. They cut him, and what happened? He got claimed by the Cincinnati Bengals. This has
Yep.
happened before with a player the Bills liked, Ike Butker. He went, the Bills liked him. There wasn't a spot for him. They cut him. He signed with the Chiefs. They regretted it. They got Ike Butker back, and he's been here for like 3 years now. So are the Bills going to have that same level of caution with Nick McLeod? Or another guy, I think, is Cam Lewis. He's been gunning on special teams unit through 2 days. He's been in multiple camp reports and has had multiple pass breakups. I think if there is another guy, I think it's the two stalking horses right now are Cam Lewis and Nick McLeod for maybe that 10th DB spot or that spot while Tre White still recovers. What do you think?
I think it comes down to, at least as of this point, it's one of those two guys, right?
Mhm.
But I do think it's dependent on the roster gymnastics, as you put it. I like that term, at other positions. It may not even matter. Look, so percentages, right? Like, you talk about, like, what are the percent chances of these guys making the team? It's low, right? Like, let's start with 0 and it goes up from there. If Tre White's not ready for week 1, goes up even more from there. If Tre White's not ready for week 1 and they decide to take away from other positions, it goes even more up from there. So,
Mhm.
Cam Lewis, Nick McLeod, probably in the driver's seat at least through 2 days. Again, it's a long camp, but
Yep.
those guys were here. These guys have been here as well. So
Mhm.
they will already have a leg up on guys like Christian Benford, who's a rookie coming from, FCS. So Nick McLeod and Cam Lewis are going to have a leg up on guys like Benford, and Elijah Griffin, who, was a practice squad guy that
Mhm.
he's probably not going to get a ton of reps to kind of
Mhm.
show what he can do. So it's
There,
going to be tough. I think those guys are going to be clear practice squad guys if they don't make the
there,
team. But I'm talking about Griffin and Benford. But
there's
Nick,
just there's so many ways you can get into the weeds with all of this, right? Like
yeah,
I just mentioned the Nick McLeod thing, claimed by the Bengals. Do the Bills want to risk that again? Cam Lewis, been here a ton, has been gunning on special teams. You look at Christian Benford, draft pick, right? Do you want to cut a draft pick? Probably don't want to cut a draft pick. You look at Elijah Griffin. We gave him a 2-year futures deal instead of a 1-year future deal. Tim Harris, who we haven't talked about at all. Leslie Frazier mentioned twice in his press conference today. John Scott pointed that out. I went back and I listened. He's like, yeah, if White's not going to be ready, we really got to get Kyer, Dane, and Harris ready to go. I think he might have been saying that because Harris is a boundary only corner. I think he was also fresh on his mind talking about Tim Harris, but like there is literally that clip from It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia where Charlie Day's character is just pointing at like the conspiracy board. There are a million conspiracies you can point at any of these depth wide receivers, and you can run yourself ragged trying to think, who has the lead in the clubhouse, who's going to be the Delshon Phillips. But it's going to be really interesting to see. The Cover One guys did a great job sort of talking us all down in the group chat. Like, listen, guys, pads aren't on yet, meaning the pass rush is going to get the better of the offensive line. The DBs know that there's really no threat to run the ball, so they don't have to really worry about the line of scrimmage. They can just concentrate with what they're doing in the secondary. So the defense always has that advantage, and the secondary has that advantage early on in training camp. But this depth situation, it's gonna be interesting. It's gonna be really fun. McLeod, but like you said, McLeod and Lewis have that early lead. Before we move on to safeties, though, Elam has been mostly on Diggs through the first 2 days, and the veteran is taken into the school of hard knocks. Dane Jackson has apparently looked very solid per multiple reports. Teron Johnson is hawking the nickel like usual. He was stride for stride with McKenzie today. Aaron gave him his chops there. What's your confidence level in these three? More specifically, like how long does your right now, how long does your confidence stretch? Is it I'm confident in Elam and Jackson on the boundary for 1 week? I'm confident for 2 weeks. I'm confident up until the bye week, or I'm confident for the whole season if need be. What is your confidence level in those two on the boundary?
Middling, right? If it's for the whole, if it's for the whole season, not great, but like middling for like multiple weeks, right? And it's not a knock on Kyer Elam at all. I think it's just the fact that he's a rookie and it's going to take him some time. Now, I do think the Bills are there's one of two ways you can look at it. You could say, well, let's put him on Diggs for iron sharpens iron, right? And just throw him into the fire and get him those reps against our best and just let him learn. Or the other mindset would be, well, is that going to shake his confidence? And you don't want that to happen for a guy that you might need to play week 1. I don't think that's the right mindset. I think that's kind of the coward's mindset. So I think what they're doing is right. I think put him on Diggs right now. You draft him in the first round. You traded up to get him. You gave away a 4th round pick. There's all these videos, these Bills embeds, these different clips coming out about Kyer Elam and put the playbook on the plane, all that stuff. He's got to be the guy that mans that fort until Tre White comes back. So you're doing the right thing by putting him on Diggs. I mean, this isn't like, some other teams, mediocre to below average number 1 wide receiver, right? That you're going against a top 5 easily wide receiver in the NFL as a rookie. So man, it's tough. It's going to be tough, but it's going to be better for him in the long run. So I think as time goes on, my confidence level will get higher for those guys. And, but right now I'd say it's middling.
Yeah, we got Dad of a Bills fan coming in with the super chat. Always appreciate you. Dad of a Bills fan saying much more fun agonizing over who to cut than trying to convince yourself Kavika Mitchell and Kevin Cobb are the answer. Ain't that the truth?
So happy when they signed Kavika Mitchell. I'll never forget it.
The Brandon Riley hives, the disappointment when Brandon Riley doesn't make the team. I could be mixing up running backs here, but who is the running back who had just an absolute killer season for preseason for the Bills? Tore it up. Everyone thought he was going to make the team and contribute. He got cut. He got claimed by the Lions. That wasn't Xavier.
Was it that guy?
That wasn't Xavier Oman, was it?
No, wasn't it that guy that did like kick returns and punt returns also? Or did he end up making the team?
Someone in the comment section save us.
It wasn't Gillisley. It was someone else. And people loved him.
Yeah. It was like a power, like a bruising back, like a guy who weighed like 220. Joik
I'm
Bell.
thinking
Joik Bell. There it is. Oh, the summer of Joik Bell. That was a summer to
and
remember.
who is it that I'm thinking of? He
So
must
much
have been
so that I
on the
couldn't remember
team.
his name, but thank you, AK Cash, for coming in with Joik Bell.
Chris Janke, you'll know. It's
Xavier
like
Oman
there
was a
was
throwback too.
who was that guy? It wasn't Gillisley. It was a smaller guy. He was more of a
Shad
scat back.
Williams.
No, it was more recent than that. It was like during
Oh,
the
Marcus
Tyrod,
Murphy.
maybe Marcus
He
Murphy.
was on
Yeah,
the
it might have
roster
been
for a while. Marcus
might have
Murphy
been
was on the roster.
Marcus Murphy.
I
Might have been
love me
Marcus.
some. I
Yes, it
love
was Marcus
Marcus
Murphy.
Murphy. And then who was that kick and punt return specialist that had that huge game against the Packers when we won too? Oh, why am I blanking on his name?
Brandon Tate? No, not Brandon Tate.
No, not Brandon Tate.
Thigpen? No.
Yes, Thig
Thigpen?
Pen. Thig Pen. Yes, Thig Pen was the man. And Marcus Murphy was the man. Yeah, Xavier Oman sucked. Lionel Gates was another guy I had huge hope for. He sucked. Jonathan Williams was a guy who I had so much hope for, and is still like in the league. Like
He had some
every
decent
year,
games for the Colts, you know?
yeah, like he's just is around as a fourth running back, but like never plays. Carlos Williams couldn't stay out of trouble, couldn't stay out of his own way. Dwayne Wright, so many throwbacks in that running
I
back
liked
room. Anyway,
Gillisley too, man. I always liked Gillisley, and then when he left, it was
we're,
like,
we're losing the tight 30 here. We're losing the tight 30
all
or
right,
the
well,
tight
let's
90.
get
We're
back
losing
on
the
track.
tight
Let's
90.
get back on track.
Safeties. Jordan Poyer took the podium on the first day announcing that he will not hold in. I thought that was awesome. I don't know whether the Bills planned that or Jordan Poyer asked for that, but for him to stand up there and face the music day one of training camp, I think speaks volumes for who Jordan Poyer is as a person. Same with him not holding out or holding in. I think that speaks volumes for him as a person. His agent, Drew Rosenhaus, was on hand for the first day of practice. Don't think that was a coincidence either. What are your thoughts on the Jordan Poyer situation?
I think that it was a tactically like smart move, right? Drew Rosenhaus isn't stupid. He knows he's there. People are going to be making assumptions for Poyer to go out and just address it day one, nip it in the bud, at least for now, keep the attention on the team and on practice and all those things. Very smart on his part, right? A show of good faith on his part that he was going to do right by the team. Drew Rosenhaus is there to take care of all that business behind closed doors, and we know what kind of agent he is. So for me, making Jordan Poyer's sort of contract situation a non-story over the first 2 days of camp, it was very smart on his part tactically, I believe. I don't think he lost any leverage, whatever leverage he might have had. I don't think it was a negative on him at all. I think if anything, it did show a good faith to the Bills that he was going to do that. The culture, as Justin says, and I do think eventually the Bills will do right by him. So, I'm pretty happy with how the whole thing played out.
I mean, he's a pro, contract or not. He's going to be motivated this season, whether he's motivated because he wants to win a Super Bowl and he gets a new contract, or he's motivated for a new contract from another team.
Or he's motivated because he's annoyed with Tyreek Hill.
Yeah, because he's annoyed with Tyreek Hill. You got the generic best off season of my career out of him during that press conference. He knows the playbook in and out. He didn't need to be there in the spring. They even mentioned it with Leslie Frazier. Leslie Frazier was like, honestly, it was kind of good. Like he even said that in training camp this year, they are going to rest Micah Hyde and Jordan Poyer. And you saw it today. Jaquan Johnson was taking first team reps because they want to get Jaquan Johnson, DeMar Hamlin, and Josh Thomas more reps. They're like, we can even risk resting these guys. Like they know the system. We can put them on snap counts in training camp. We don't have to worry about them. They'll know what to do. They'll be professionals. They'll be ready week one. But that leads me to my next question. Like, how does the depth shake out? Because I feel so bad for Josh Thomas. Like there's just, unless they keep 5 safeties, it seems like there's no path to the roster. DeMar Hamlin's a draft pick who they seem high on. Jaquan Johnson's now in year 4. He's been an A special teamer for years. He was the first guy off the bench today to fill in for Poyer. The thing that I asked myself though, is like Poyer and Hire are so good, which is great. But like Jaquan Johnson has now developed for 4 years under his rookie contract. His rookie contract is up and he's never done more than spot started 1 game in a season. Like, does Jaquan Johnson pull the DeMar Hamlin route next offseason and just leave for another opportunity anywhere? And if so, do you maybe weigh the fact that Jaquan Johnson's in a contract year when thinking about whether you want to roster Josh Thomas? These are the kind of questions you think about when it's just so settled in the first two spots. But what are your thoughts on the depth and how that shakes out?
I mean, they did keep Dean Marlowe in a contract year, right?
Mhm.
So, and then he left, obviously. I don't. It's going to take something. I think it's going to take them keeping a fifth safety for something odd to happen here. But other than those four guys making the team as of right now, right? I think obviously things could change in camp if, you know, if for some reason Josh Thomas like just balls out in camp and like makes Jaquan Johnson expendable. That's possible, I guess. Yeah, I think he meant Dean Marlowe.
Yeah, I probably would have spoke there. My bad.
But this is like one of those positions where honestly, I don't try to overread it, right? I think it's just going to be those four guys, and then unless they keep a fifth safety, which probably isn't likely, then that's just going to be what happens.
All right. We're not going to make the tight 90. We're probably going to go a little over, but we got to get to special teams before we close things out. Tyler Bass, probably good. I don't know. No one's really tweeted about him or anything. So that's good. I'm sure if he was missing kick, someone would tweet about him. Somebody tweeted today that Reed Ferguson was looking jacked. So that's always good.
Nice.
Having a jacked long snapper, but punter situation, some drama brewing. Matt Hawk was booming. Some. He was consistent with his hang time. He was the only one who held for kicks on day one. Matt Ariza had some boomers. We saw those on Twitter, but he also shanked a couple. He was inconsistent. You know, we saw last year the Bills cut 2 day 3 picks in Matt Ariza or in Rashad Wildgoose and Jack Anderson. They've cut Jake Fromm before. They're not allergic to cutting dudes who they've drafted on day 3. Ariza was the third punter drafted in this draft class. So clearly maybe the NFL isn't as high on him as we were in the pre-draft process or the draft community was. Is he not the near lock that we thought he was?
Maybe you could put his percentages down a few points, but I still would be very, very surprised if he wasn't the near lock that we think he is still. I mean, it's 2 days. He's a rookie. The reason you drafted him is because you knew that you were deficient at that position, right?
Yeah.
Like Matt Hawk isn't all of a sudden going to become this, born again punter that like has all these new skills. It's like he is what he is, right? Like he is what he is. We know what he is.
I love that comment. But Brandon Beane said in his postseason press conference, and I guess he had to say it because he was still under contract. So before they reworked the bonus and stuff, he was like, Matt Hawk is a great punter in this league. He just had a bad year. Whether that was Beane making excuses for him or not.
But then you go out and draft a punter. Yeah. Why draft a punter if that's the case? You can sign a undrafted free agent.
I think you're right. I think anything within the margin of error goes to Matt Ariza, but what if we get to the preseason and Ariza shanks a couple?
No, listen.
The Bills have what's the leash? We've seen guys who are very hyped coming out of college bounce around the league. Corey Vedvik, Corey Vedvik comes to mind as a couple of guys. So, I'm all in on the Ariza train. I don't want to panic yet, but
there was a point in time. There was a point in time, and people can't deny this because this happened. There was a point in time where the debate was, do we keep Stephen Hauschka or do we go with the rookie Tyler Bass? Yeah. And the Bills were like, we're going with the rookie. Stephen Hauschka has been an excellent kicker in the NFL. Comparatively, Stephen Hauschka is a better place kicker than Matt Hawk is a punter. And they still went with Tyler Bass. So I know, and field goal kicking is more important than punting, right? It is more important. So, if you want to read that precedent, then I don't see any way they keep Matt Hawk over Matt Ariza. And feel free to clip this up when they do keep Matt Hawk and make me look bad. But man,
you've officially talked me down, so I'm feeling good. You've talked me down.
Yeah.
I was having a little anxiety attack there for a second. Kick and punt return. So the order of kick returners: Marquez Stevenson was the first to return kicks, then James Cook, then Raheem Blackshear, then Khalil Shakir in that order. Punt returns in order were Isaiah McKenzie, Khalil Shakir, Tavon Austin, and then Marquez Stevenson. I thought that was the most interesting. Marquez Stevenson was the first kick returner, the last punt returner. What do you make of the
Well,
early return rotations? Not that we're 2 days in, so like,
that
what do
that
you make
lines
of it?
up with, I mean, that at least lines up with what he did in
Mhm,
college, right? Going back 2 years, like, he was a proficient kick returner, Marcus
mhm,
Stevenson, and didn't do much in the punt return game. Um, I'm looking at this as, like, they're just trying to get a lot of guys reps at
mhm.
this point and trying to figure this out. This is a big question mark still. Interesting that they mix James Cook into the mix at kick return.
Yep.
Um, and I do like that they had Khalil Shakir in both, which is interesting to me. Now, he wasn't tops of the charts at either, which you wouldn't expect yet, but he was in both. Raheem Blackshear is an interesting name as a guy that maybe ends up on the practice squad as your sort of
Yeah.
RB3, maybe return man in a pinch and waiting.
Mhm,
I compared him to a guy like Bam Knight at NC State, who was in the draft process as well. Blackshear, a guy who transferred from Rutgers to Virginia Tech because of um, obviously the coaching change that happened in Rutgers, and was a little bit of a pretty good all around player at Virginia Tech, running back,
mhm.
doing returns, a little bit of receiving out of the backfield. So he's a talented guy. But at this point, it's just getting reps for these guys, and I think
And can
figure
I say
things
this
out as
too?
camp goes on.
Can I say this too? Like, I look at Raheem Blackshear, the vibes I'm getting from Raheem Blackshear? Guy we just talked about 20 minutes ago, Marcus Murphy. I'm getting some like Marcus
Yeah,
Murphy
I could see
vibes
that.
from Raheem
I could
Blackshear.
see that.
Mar-
Yeah, I
Marcus
could see
Murphy
that.
was 5'8", 195, a little bit of a slender guy, sort of that like scat type of back who helped in the return game. I think that, and a couple of people in the comment section specifically have talked about Raheem Blackshear as the sleeper, and I really wasn't vibing with that thought. But I mean, you got to think about it. If Isaiah McKenzie truly is going to win this slot job, that opens some things up because Sean McDermott doesn't like to have his kick returners and the punt returners also like playing the skill positions regularly. Blackshear was out there like 60 minutes after practice today, catching punts, fielding punts after practice was over. I think Raheem Blackshear knows damn well that if he goes out there in the preseason and lights it up as a kick returner and shows that he can catch a football and be a punt returner too, there is a spot on the 53-man roster that he can legitimately earn. If not, he's definitely, I think, a lock for the practice squad at this point. But I think that there is an outside chance that he could earn that role. But I do think Stevenson, I think, probably has the leg up at this point. It looks like maybe they want IMAC as the punt returner, maybe Stevenson as the kick returner. Who knows? But preseason is going to shake that out. Really, the game situations is what shakes that
Game
out.
situation. Exactly.
Um, Khalil Shakir, with these like nicks and bruises and all these different injuries and stuff that he's dealing with, I'm kind of the mindset now that I don't even know if I want him returning kicks and punts. So it should be interesting. We
You're just
almost did
trying to
it.
get Odell. You're just trying to get Odell.
Yeah,
That's all you're
we almost did it. We almost kept it at tight 90. We're at an hour and 33 here. Any final thoughts? Any parting thoughts before we head out here this afternoon? I want to thank everyone in the live chat for conversing with us. And any final thoughts in the chat, let us know. Anything you thought we missed or anything you want to talk about before we head out here. But before I get to the comment section, Dave, any parting thoughts here?
It's nice that camp is back. I want to thank the guys who from Cover One who went to camp, did all the great reporting there. Pictures, content being produced, um, written stuff's coming out. Like, it's just amazing. Like I said, like everything that you could think of that you'd want to hear about is being covered. So,
Mhm.
and we're only 2 days in. That's the great thing about it. So, we'll continue to have you covered throughout camp, and definitely be sure to tune into all the different shows throughout the week and the written stuff as
Mhm.
well. Um, I I'm excited that camp's back, man.
Yeah.
I was going through some withdrawals and trying to separate myself from sports a little bit during the summer to try to take my mind off things. But now that camp's back, I'm sucked right back in, and I'm ready. I'm ready for it.
Yeah. Possible if you come in and say, what's happening tomorrow? I think they have a practice tomorrow. I think Thursday is their first day off, if I'm not mistaken. Jason Taylor comes in and says, is Capra still on the roster? He is. Chris Janke
They're off tomorrow,
was,
back on Wednesday,
oh,
I
they're off
believe.
tomorrow. Oh, today's Monday.
Yep.
I thought today was Tuesday for a second. What am I thinking? Today is Monday.
They're off Tuesday and
hell's wrong with
Thursday, I
me?
believe.
Jason Taylor comes in and says this Capra still on the roster. Chris Jenke did a nice deep dive into the Bills embedded. Jacob Capra was the third center, snapping the ball to Matt Barkley. So yeah. And then Steve Rose comes in and says Capra's going to be an All-Pro. Book it. If I saw Jacob Capra like walking down the street, I wouldn't even know it was him. I can't tell you whether he's black or white. I can't tell you that. Sounds white. That's all I can tell you. Someone pull up a picture of Jacob Capra. Like, describe him to me.
He's like a borderline ginger guy.
I like
He
it.
looks like he should be playing for like the Packers or someone like that. Which
He
actually
was a
I think
Packer
he was.
before
I
the
think he
Bills,
was on the Packers. Yeah, that's who he looks like he should be playing for.
Pops Mafia says Capra had a bad snap yesterday. Andy Larson says, any news on Christian Benford? No, like
Not really.
I've read Joe B's reports, Sales reports, Perino's reports, Dean's Astro notes. Checked in with the Cover One guys. I have not heard anything on Christian Benford yet, but it's early, so it should be interesting. Just want to thank you guys, the live viewers. Again, you guys make the show what it is. It's just awesome to be able to come here every Monday night, have this conversation with you guys. If you haven't had a chance yet, go check out the new Cover One website. It's freaking amazing, cover1.net. They have this new thing called a One Pass. It's sort of like a premium membership to Cover One, premium articles, access to the Slack channel, free swag, all that stuff for $57 a year. It's well worth your money. Eric and Kendall and Anthony, they're all working on things that are for One Pass access only. Some things that is some premium content. So go, and I highly recommend checking that out for $57 a year. If you are interested in that kind of stuff and you're interested in supporting the Cover One community, but just the usual reminder, on-demand viewers, leave a comment. We'll get to it the best we can over the course of the week. Smash that like button, whether you're watching live or on demand, helps us with the algorithm. And the show can be found in audio format as well on all major podcasting platforms. Just type in Air Raid Buffalo. Thank you guys so much. Thank you to Jessica Tennis, Alan Collins, Chris Jenke, and dad of a Bills fan. You guys are all in the running for a 26 shirt giveaway that we'll be doing before the Bills Rams game with your super chats today as well. So thank you guys so much. We appreciate it. There've probably been like 5 training camp recap shows today across the various networks. We still got 100 plus of you in here, and we're an hour and a half in. So Bills Mafia, you guys are awesome. Luke Tenuta was playing some guard today with the second team. That's a great little parting comment there from Johnny Utah. Thank you so much. And until next time, go Bills.
Go Bills.
Are we having fun yet?